I got a call from my sister, Emily. She was crying, completely devastated. Through sobs, she told me her house had been demolished while she was away on a business trip to Seattle. At first, I thought I misunderstood her. Demolished? Her house. That made no sense. But she was hysterical, and I knew this wasn't a joke. I grabbed my keys and drove 3 hours straight back to my hometown, Riverview. As I pulled into her neighborhood, my stomach twisted into knots. I remembered her house, quaint, well-kept, a beautiful garden she tended herself. But as I turned onto Willow Lane, I froze. Her house was gone. There was nothing but shattered wood, crushed bricks, and splintered beams scattered across what had once been her front yard. A bright yellow backhoe still stood idle nearby, the smell of freshly broken lumber thick in the air. Emily was standing there, pale and shaking, staring at what remained of her life. "I was only gone for 4 days," Emily whispered when she saw me. Her eyes were red, swollen. "I came back and found everything destroyed." We walked through the debris carefully. Furniture lay broken in the dirt, photographs trampled, glass glittering in the afternoon sun. Off to the side, a large wooden sign was staked into the ground. "Future Community Garden, Willow Creek HOA." My stomach dropped. Emily explained she hadn't received any notice, no letters, no calls, not even an email warning her about this. She'd left for her trip on Monday. By Friday, her home was reduced to rubble. An elderly neighbor, Mr. Lawson, approached us quietly. "It was the HOA," he said in a hushed voice. "Their president, Deborah Winters. She's been causing all kinds of trouble ever since she got elected last year." I nodded slowly, listening. Deborah Winters. The name rang a bell, but not in a good way. She was known for being ruthless, obsessed with order, and eager to expand her influence. What no one knew yet was that I'm the county sheriff just 2 towns over. But I wasn't about to reveal that information now. If they knew who I was, they'd lawyer up fast. Instead, I leaned in close to Emily. "Don't tell anyone I'm law enforcement," I told her quietly. "Let's see what they have to say for themselves first." She gave a hesitant nod. I could feel my anger bubbling just beneath the surface. Whoever was responsible for this was going to pay, and I was going to make sure of it. The confrontation. The next morning, Emily and I drove to the Willow Creek HOA office. It was a polished little building, all glass and steel, with gold letters spelling out Willow Creek Homeowners Association on the front door. Emily's hand was trembling as she reached for the handle, but I gave her a reassuring look. "Stay calm," I said. "Let me do most of the talking." Inside, the front desk receptionist sat rigidly behind a modern counter. She was impeccably dressed, blonde bob, tailored navy suit, typing away without even glancing up. "Excuse me," I said politely. "We need to speak with whoever approves demolitions." She finally looked up, her expression sharp and impatient. "That would be me," she said. "Deborah Winters, HOA president. Do you have an appointment?" Emily stepped forward. "I'm Emily Carter. You demolished my house at 139 Willow Lane while I was away. I want to know why." Deborah clicked something on her computer, sighed, and shook her head. 139 Willow Lane. That property was in serious violation of our community standards," she said flatly. "We sent multiple notices. I never received anything." Emily's voice cracked as she tried to stay composed. "You can't just tear down someone's home." Deborah gave her a condescending smile. "We absolutely can. Section 9, Paragraph 3 of the HOA Charter clearly states that after 3 unresolved violations, we can take corrective action. Corrective action doesn't mean demolition." I said, my voice hard but controlled. "It means fines, forced repairs, not destroying someone's house." Deborah narrowed her eyes at me. "And you are?" "I'm her brother, and I'm here to understand how this is remotely legal." She rolled her eyes. The procedures were followed. The board voted. It's all proper. I bit back my anger. "Then you won't mind showing us the documentation, those notices and the demolition approval." Deborah stiffened. "That's confidential HOA business. Members only." Emily was trembling again. "You destroyed everything I owned. Photos, family heirlooms. How dare you? Deborah's expression hardened. Perhaps next time you'll take our notices seriously. We have standards to uphold. I could feel my badge burning in my pocket. But it wasn't time to play that card yet. We're not leaving until we see those documents, I insisted. Deborah stood abruptly. Then I'll call security. This is private property, and you're causing a disruption. I put a steady hand on Emily's shoulder. We'll go for now, but this isn't over. As we left, Deborah called after us with a smug smile. The community garden will be a lovely improvement. Emily broke down again in the car. How is she getting away with this? She won't, I promised. She has no idea who she's dealing with. Building the case. Over the next few days, I quietly leveraged my position as county sheriff. I started with the city records department. Linda, I said over the phone, it's Sheriff Carter. I need to check if any demolition permits were issued for 139 Willow Lane in Willow Creek. After a few minutes, she came back. Nothing. Not in the last year. No applications, no approvals. That confirmed my suspicion. Deborah Winters had ordered the demolition without legal authorization. I drove to Peterson Demolition, the same company whose logo was on the equipment still at the property. Mike Peterson, the owner, looked nervous as soon as I introduced myself. I'm investigating the demolition at 139 Willow Lane, I told him, flashing my badge. Mike held up his hands. I just followed orders. The HOA gave me paperwork. Looked official. Let me see it, I said. He dug through a filing cabinet and handed me a folder. The letterhead was Willow Creek HOA. The signature was Deborah's. There was no city permit, no inspector's approval. Just her signature and a rubber stamp that looked like it came from a kid's toy set. You know this is illegal, I told him. Mike turned pale. She said it was all handled on their end. They've hired us for fences and sheds before. I didn't think. Well, you better start thinking, I said. I'll need a signed statement. He agreed, probably to save himself from prosecution. Then I started knocking on doors. Many neighbors were hesitant at first, but the stories trickled out. Deborah had fined one couple $500 for a garden gnome. Another family had their solar panels removed because they weren't aesthetically pleasing. Mrs. Patel, who lived across the street from Emily, was fined for her Diwali decorations. I documented everything. Witness statements, photos, emails, texts. By the time I was done, I had a mountain of evidence. I called James Monroe, the county attorney. We have a serious situation, I said. After reviewing the file, James agreed. This is criminal, he said. Destruction of property. Fraud. Abuse of authority. Good, I replied. Let's make sure we do this by the book. Setting the trap. I wasn't done yet. I needed to expose Deborah in front of everyone. I contacted all 6 HOA board members. Some were shocked to hear what Deborah had done. Maria Gonzalez admitted Deborah had blackmailed her, threatened to leak her son's juvenile record if she didn't vote with her. Robert Shun, another board member, told me Deborah often bypassed full votes by calling emergency sessions with only 3 members. Piece by piece, I dismantled Deborah's web of lies. Then I contacted Dave Harmon, a reporter for the Riverview Times. Come to Thursday's HOA meeting, I told him. You'll want to see this. The meeting. The community center was packed. Word had spread. Deborah sat at the head table, acting like she had everything under control. I waited until the public comment portion. Liam Carter, Deborah called, her voice cold. You have 5 minutes. I stood up with my file. I'm here about the demolition of 139 Willow Lane, I began. It was done illegally. Deborah immediately interrupted. We've addressed this. Your sister violated HOA standards. Funny, I said, holding up a document. The city says there was no permit, no legal authorization. The demolition was illegal. Gasps echoed through the room. I also have a signed statement from Peterson Demolition. Deborah Winters ordered them to demolish the home while Emily was out of town, knowing full well there was no permit. Maria Gonzalez stood up. You never told us it was a house. You called an emergency vote with only 3 of us. Deborah's confidence crumbled. This is a smear campaign, she yelled. Who do you think you are? I pulled out my badge. County Sheriff Liam Carter. The room exploded in whispers. Deborah's face drained of color. And we're filing charges, I continued. Destruction of property. Fraud. Abuse of power. Justice served. Deborah was formally charged within days. Her allies abandoned her. Peterson Demolition cooperated, providing incriminating messages from Deborah. The HOA was restructured. Robert Chin became interim president. New policies were put in place. Transparency. Accountability. No one person would ever have unchecked power again. Emily rebuilt her house, stronger than before. The community rallied around her. Donations poured in. Volunteers helped clear debris. Even the media took interest, and our story sparked HOA reforms across the state. As for Deborah, she took a plea deal. 18 months in prison. Restitution. A $250,000 fine. She was also ordered to complete community service, maintaining the garden she planned on Emily's property. As I watched her pulling weeds under supervision one day, Emily stood beside me. You know, she said, smiling, she never knew who she was dealing with. No, I agreed. And that's exactly why she lost. And that's the story of how Deborah Winters demolished the wrong house, my sister's house. And justice was served.